Welcome back to another episode of A.IdlePodcast, the podcast where I do a weekly book review. This week I will be reviewing Lovecraft Country by Matt Ruff. For all of my visual people, here is the cover right here. And this cover actually has the cast of the series on it, but I'm sure you can probably still find the original cover somewhere. Now, Lovecraft Country is a sci-fi novel set in the 1950s in Chicago, and it adheres to all of the challenges and events of that era. So that means we're mixing a little bit of magic, war, family, race relations, class, and culture, with a little bit of conspiracy. So this is certainly quite the ride. Disclaimer though, for anyone that doesn't want spoilers, there are some spoilers for the book, but if you haven't seen the series yet and you want to kind of go into it with a blank slate, there are going to be a few comparisons to the series, as well as some of the spoilers on some of the themes of the series as well. So Matt Ruff is a fiction writer, and according to his website, he knew since he was 5 years old that he wanted to be a fiction writer. So he had a set path already. His first novel, Fool on the Hill, was released in 1988. And fun fact, that was actually basically his senior thesis at Cornell University when he was there. And he said that after about 6 months, it was actually picked up and published. And so that's super cool that as soon as you graduate college, you have this book out there. And I guess that's a testament to the fact that he kind of knew all his life that he wanted to do that. So, that's just a tip on preparing yourself for things that are to come. Now, Lovecraft Country was released in 2016. It is a New York Times bestseller, and the series was released in fall of 2020, so that's still fairly new. Now, before we get into Lovecraft Country, which is the book we're covering, I want to just touch on H.P. Lovecraft, which is he was a writer, and obviously a lot of the themes and the overall universe in this book are inspired by his work. So he was a writer that had kind of unique writing capabilities in the fact that it was fiction pieces, but they were very strange and kind of weird. And you'll see what I'm talking about once you read Lovecraft Country. Not in a bad way, but just kind of out there. Now, he was also said to have been inspired in part by Edgar Allan Poe, so that gives you kind of a picture of where we're going with this. But some of even the creatures from H.P. Lovecraft's books and series and stuff pop up in the series as well as in the book. So there's a lot of similarities between that. This is not a piece written by H.P. Lovecraft. That's important for us to note. I know some people, I think when the trailer first came out for this series, I know a lot of people were kind of upset because I don't think they understood that it really didn't have much to do with him. H.P. Lovecraft's works are referenced in the plot, but that's about it. This is not written by him. So also, we need to get this out of the way since I definitely like to be very open and honest with you guys. He was definitely racist. Now, there are some sources that say, as he progressed in his career and life, that kind of changed. But there is a piece where he is quoted as describing Black people as beasts. And so that's kind of ironic because now we have this book, Lovecraft Country, that incorporates Black characters and treats them as the human beings that they are. So that's enough on that, but I just wanted to give you guys fair warning of what we're dealing with here. All right, so this book is structured pretty cool, actually. I really, as you guys probably know, I really love getting different perspectives or just following different characters. And with this book, we follow a different character with each kind of section, but it's still in the third person. However, with each main character, we get to watch them go on their own journey. And it's almost structured like an anthology piece. So anthology is kind of like a few series do it or movies do it a lot, where it'll be different stories that kind of, combine to create the season of, the TV show or whatever. But in this case, all of the stories are relevant to the overall plot. And some of them we're seeing like the events from two different perspectives, but everything ultimately comes together. It's just nice to see how the characters encounter their own little obstacles that ultimately bring them all together at the end to go against the antagonist. Alrighty, my favorite theme time. So, there's quite a bit to discuss when it comes to theme with this book. And that is mainly due to the fact that we deal a lot with intersectionality. So the dictionary definition of that is the belief that the overlap of social identities contributes to the specific type of oppression and discrimination experienced by an individual. What that really just means is that we're observing and noting how when two groups of oppression are kind of covered in one. For example, a black woman, being black and being a woman, that's, you're dealing with the oppressions that come with being, a woman as well as being black. Or we have gay black men, being black, being gay, so just to kind of give you a realm of that. But in particular, we deal a lot with black women, and that is by way of Letitia, Hippolyta, and Ruby. Now, this, of course, is involving race and gender. So racism is referring to the fact that these characters are second-class citizens according to Jim Crow. So during this era, it was legal to limit black people to buying property in one place or not eating at specific restaurants. But also sexism, being women were treated as second-class citizens according to gender norms. So there were still certain things that even white women were limited from doing. So, for example, there were certain jobs that are not open to women during that time period. And I would say probably during this period, that's when a lot of women were kind of encouraged to stay at home. But we get a crossroads of that with these characters. Now, in particular, Ruby definitely personifies intersectionality to a T. And this is because, spoiler alert, if you don't want to hear a spoiler, fast forward like maybe 4 or 5 minutes. So Ruby quite literally experiences the plot from two different perspectives, and that is because she is a black woman, but she has a way to step into the body of a white woman and go out into the world. Again, we're dealing with magic here. So what we see is kind of her being able to grasp some sort of freedom. She's one of the characters that, more so in the series, we're able to see this, but she wants more for herself. She wants to accomplish certain things, and the glass ceiling is really kind of holding her down. And so when she finally gets this opportunity, it's like the perfect opportunity for her in particular, because she's been wanting so badly to get some sort of freedom from the life that she is currently living. And so we see her kind of grasp at this, but then we're also recognizing that she does deal with a little bit of sexism as far as when she is a white woman trying to accomplish certain things. There's slight remarks and things like that. Nothing compared to when she was a black woman, but just to keep in mind, there's still some of that going on. Now, this, of course, brings up the conversation of white women versus black women. And if you want to take it to like the oppression Olympics, who had it worse, whatever. But this reminded me of a conversation that I heard a while ago, and I would love to hear more about this if anyone has done research on this, or just to chime in your opinion. The idea of feminism versus womanism. So we all know what feminism is, and that's just we advocating for gender equality. But this is now seen more as like a mainstream thing, and it's seen as something that is benefiting a select group of women, being white women. That is because you can't have all women being equal if Black women in particular are still dealing with the issues associated with being Black? So then we have womanism, which to my understanding is kind of like an earlier incarnation of feminism, and that is inclusive gender equality. So this was a movement that was really fronted and advocated for through Black women. So I just thought of that. I know I heard it previously. I don't know too much about it. Maybe I heard it in like a class in college or something like that. But I would love to hear anyone else's thoughts if you've done any research on that. But that did remind me of the whole idea of wanting equality, but not being able to reconcile the fact that Black women have to fight two battles, sexism and racism. Now, the second theme I want to discuss is the relationship between a parent and an adult child. So this is dealing with Atticus Freeman, who is one of our main characters. He's the first one we're introduced to, and his father, Montrose Freeman. Now, this mainly is touching on Black fatherhood. So what we see is that in order for our protagonists to really get to where they need to go, winning whatever battle they're fighting, they have to recognize the necessity of the bond of being father and son in order to combat the worldly trauma that they're encountering. The irony in that, of course, is that there is a trauma bond that may exist between the two of them because they have gone through, quite some things, including losing Atticus's mother. So they're kind of tasked with leaning on that bond in order for the greater good. And they have a strained relationship, which is also given more light in the series. But that certainly represents the hardships that is associated with a child growing into adulthood and reconciling their resentments and their feelings toward their parent in order to forge almost a new relationship, because the roles change as a parent gets older, as a child gets older. Ultimately, the parent ends up becoming the one that needs the care when they get into old age. And so it's just kind of going through the stages of life. But I think that once someone hits kind of adulthood, young adulthood, it gets very strange because, especially with people that are only children or firstborn, your parents have never really been there before. So it's learning when to pull back, learning when to kind of go in and be the parent. All of that is dealt with through Atticus and Montrose and all of the protectiveness that comes with that. What I also liked about their relationship is that it opposes the stereotype of a single mom raising a child, the dad is absent or just choosing not to be around, and the child ultimately suffers because of that. But we have here a single father that raised Atticus Freeman, who is a very polite person, was in the service, went overseas to fight in the war, very smart, knowledgeable, strong person. And so all of these are just kind of opposing that stereotype of Black children not having someone to look up to, in particular sons looking up to their fathers. So next I want to talk about perseverance. I don't think any of this story would have been possible without our protagonists recognizing that perseverance is their largest ally. It's really necessary in the fight against racism, as well as the magic and the warlocks that they're battling. And so you can almost say that just by dealing with the Jim Crow laws and things like that, that they are conditioned to kind of get through tough things. Although, they've never fought wizards before, perseverance is certainly something that they are familiar with. It requires a lot of mental strength and emotional intelligence to come up with a plan to beat these antagonists who have this extreme advantage of magic and all this power and generational knowledge. And our protagonists don't really have anything. Like, they're kind of ignorant at this point of what this world is really about. And so it really takes a lot of patience to observe the world around you in order to recognize the best method of attack. Now, what we find in the end is that the wizardry plot is resolved quite positively, but it's I don't want to say it's anticlimactic, but we are recognizing the fact, even at the end of the book series, that this may not be over. This may just be a battle and a larger war, and our group is actually kind of confronted with that through dialogue that, you guys are going to have to fight this fight again. And our characters literally respond with laughter. And that stuck out to me because here they are, they're posed with this future magical threat, and they barely made it out on top at the end of this story. And they actually laughed because they're thinking, look, we'll get it done when it happens. And the only thing we can do is just enjoy this victory, go back to our regular lives. And that, if anything, represents perseverance to me, because if that was me and I just fought a fight against all these crazy warlock racist cops and stuff like that, and they told me I had to look forward to it again, I might start crying. Like, they're really very strong-minded, strong-willed, and they have a lot of faith in themselves to get through whatever it is that comes across their plates. And also, from the audience standpoint, obviously we know that Jim Crow is still alive in this time period, and there really was a lack of resolution in race relations. And if we're looking at reality, that's facts. The 1950s, racism didn't just go away. We know that clearly, in 2021. And so just knowing that our characters have been through so much and there's still more to come, you kind of feel a little sad for them, but they've gotta get through it, I guess. And lastly, I wanted to touch on legacy. So legacy is really shown through the warlocks and their families and their lodges, that they call them. These are stations throughout the world that these families it's like their home base for everything magic, where they keep the spell books and all that good stuff, and where they practice. And so each lodge is passed through the generations, and this comes into play expansively in the series, but this knowledge stays within the bounds of that household. And this comes from just kind of dividing up the power, making sure no one really has access to the ultimate. It kind of is trying to work as a checks and balances situation between the lodges, but we find that ultimately results in them hiding information from each other, because what we find is, although this may have started with a group of, I forget how many men, maybe 12, 14, something like that, of men that wanted to do magic to bring the world back to peace, whatever it was, as we get through the generations, we find that these kids are so conditioned to live up to this legacy that they just want the power, and they want to be the most powerful one. They don't say what they want to do with that power, they just want to be powerful. So it's quite a toxic situation that I think they're setting up the generations to come, setting them up to fail ultimately. And this can be seen through Caleb Braithwaite, who is the son of Braithwaite, the lodge master. That's kind of like the main sort of antagonist here. And he's out to prove himself. And what I've found through reading, watching movies, stuff like that, when you're just solely trying to accomplish something to prove yourself to a family member, to your dad, your mom, out of spite, I believe you're more prone to make mistakes and go a little too far. And so I think certainly Caleb Braithwaite was kind of blinded by that, and just he was just trying to go too hard. Didn't really work out for him well, but that family is a mess. It was quite entertaining, but a mess. Now, before I get to my review, I just want to discuss the impact. So obviously by now we know there is a HBO series. If anyone has HBO Max, all of the episodes are on there. It's just titled Lovecraft Country. That cast is absolutely fantastic. So if you weren't convinced by the plot itself, just tune in for the cast. Amazing. Jonathan Majors plays Atticus Freeman. Michael K. Williams, who was also on HBO's The Wire as Omar, he plays Montrose Freeman, and he was awesome. He was hilarious. Journey Smollett was Letitia. Courtney B. Vance is in there. Jamie Chung. Outstanding cast. And they were, the show was ultimately given Misha Green as a showrunner. And so I love kind of what she did as far as expanding, the information that we received on these characters. Hippolyta, for example, is given basically like a whole episode to herself. And it was nice seeing her encounter different universes and different versions of herself and coming out of it, much, much stronger than before. Now, we also deal with in the show, the idea of the silencing of Black girls in Diana. Now, so this is one of the differences between the book and the series. In the series, Uncle George's child is Diana. In the book, he has a son. But this just goes to show when she gets involved in this magic nonsense, it's almost like no one really hears her, or they kind of just glaze over the fact that she's going through something. She's experiencing the same trauma that they're currently going through. And I love how they put it, that literally she was almost being ignored. And then, finally, before it was almost too late when they realized that something was very, very wrong. But that represents, intersectionality as well. But the idea that oftentimes we're not really listening to Black girls when they say something's wrong, or, they're going through something. And so that's a good thing, I think, that came out of them switching the characters a little bit, just to showcase that in particular. We get an expanded view on the idea of Black fatherhood with Atticus and Montrose. We go a little bit farther. We explore self-sacrifice and how far they are willing to go to protect their loved ones. And that, of course, plays along with who's going to protect who. Now that Atticus is an adult now, and his father is, getting up there in age, who is taking the reign as the alpha to protect this family line? And lastly, when we talk about legacy, another character switch that they did between the book and the series is Caleb in the book. Caleb Braithwaite is actually Christina in the series, and she was badass. I loved Christina. But they also played with legacy a little bit, because she was blocked from the legacy because she's a woman. And so therefore she was not allowed to even try to live up to this standard. And so again, she goes out to prove her dad wrong and goes too far and drives herself crazy. She was fantastic though, but she was crazy. Well, drop my paper. Okay, and one more thing before my review that I wanted to talk about was really the fixed but not hidden presence of racism. What I mean by that is, obviously, we're in the 1950s, we're dealing with Jim Crow, racism is a thing. However, race is not the singular theme moving the plot forward. What I find is that sometimes with fiction pieces, when there are Black characters included, it's either neither discussed that they're Black, or racism is the only thing that they're waking up every day to combat. And it's like, here's the deal. Black people do have that extra layer of plight that they have to deal with in terms of racism. But, they still got to tackle everyday life as well. There's still, like I said in my series, passion, there's relationships, there's pain, there's trauma, there's all this other stuff along with racism. And so I like that Matt Ruff gave these characters some sort of justice in the fact that they're dealing with the racism, but they also got to deal with these wizards and warlocks and stuff. And they also got to make sure their bills are paid on time so they have a place to live and all that good stuff. So I really appreciate that the characters are not only motivated by the oppression associated with racism, they all have their own, things that they want to accomplish in life in addition to that. And so seeing the balance of dealing with that as well as, just everyday life and the other stuff, it was just refreshing to me. So coming from the generation that was raised on Twilight and Harry Potter, this is huge for me because it's sci-fi, it's super cool, it's young adult, so it is kind of my age demographic, but it's also Black leads in sci-fi. Like, that's awesome. I remember when I was in high school reading through Twilight and being so entranced, and now I look back on that time and it's kind of sad because although I was so invested in that, there weren't really characters that reflected me. And not to say this is not comparable to Twilight at all. This is way better. But it's just kind of nice to be able to see someone that looks like me and may experience, similar things in a fantasy world. And just seeing a whole universe created. And there's characters that I can relate to is just super cool. So I really love it. I feel like it fulfills the fantasy gap that Twilight left after I went back and read it and realized it's not really holding up to my adolescent standards. So it was good. I will reread this book 10 out of 10 times. Seriously. It's one of those books that if I were to ever, for whatever reason, get rid of most of my books, I would keep this in my collection just to, reread it and get my creative juices flowing. So I enjoyed it. I really do recommend reading this book and then watching the series. The series was amazing. And if you're like me, I think I only got HBO Max because of the series, and I still have it. But I know they have a free trial, so you could just binge through all those episodes and then just, end your trial. But I certainly recommend this book. Now, next week, I will more than likely be reviewing The Storm Before the Storm. It's about the fall of the Roman Republic. So I am currently reading this right now. Or I'll just read another book and review it, but you will get a review on this shortly. Thank you so much. I hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next week. Thank you.